and welcome to the Social Innovation in Action program. Here is where you're going to meet the most amazing and powerful change makers at LSE. I'm Asmita and I'm going to introduce you to my cohort mates from Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship program. Today we have Mariam Tag with us from the recent cohort, founder of Float. So great to have you, Mariam. I'm excited for this, so let's get started.
Let's do it. Thanks, Asmita, for having me.
So Mariam, you're from Egypt. You have done a lot of work in the social sector with corporates, consultancies, and Ashoka. So let's get started with your journey. How did you enter the sector?
My dad was in academia, so he really believed in the power of education to bring in people from the fringes of society, and I grew up seeing that in front of me. My mom was also. I also always saw her meal prepping. She had a lot of work in the community. So I grew up learning about the importance of volunteering, trying to develop your local community. And as I grew older and started volunteering myself, I mainly volunteered with a Montessori nursery in one of Cairo's slum areas. We teach English and PE there and computer skills. It was a great experience. I learned countless lessons. Some of my most inspiring days were there. But one day, when we were in the middle of class, a boy one of the students started to sift through the garbage. Just in the middle of class, everyone was sitting. And I was very surprised, and my immediate reaction was, "What are you doing? You can't do that. You need to stop." That was in my head. It made sense at the time. When I went back home and I started thinking, this whole community is a community of garbage collectors, and this is what he did at home, and this is what he grew up seeing his family do on a day-to-day basis. And I started thinking, was that the right way to handle it? What was the right way to handle it? And I realized that although it was an amazing experience and I loved it, I didn't know if I was handling it in the right way. Right. So I kind of wanted to formalize that experience a little bit, and I wanted to join the civic sector, which is why when I graduated from university, I started looking for jobs in that sector. I couldn't find a job. A lot of people told me because the civic sector is really expanding, people it doesn't grow, so they're not hiring more people, they're probably hiring from within, or they're hiring very limited numbers. That's how I joined the private sector at the time, because it was the only job I had found at the time at the EMC at the time, Dell today, and I worked there for a bit, and then I changed jobs until I joined Ashoka in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, Ashoka, that's like one of the biggest change makers, network community out there. So what was your, experience with that kind of a platform entering there?
So I actually joined Ashoka. The time preceding Ashoka was a pretty difficult time for me. I was working for a local management consultancy at the time. And I had left my job without anything on my radar. Like, I just quit my job and I decided this is not what I wanted to do. I'm gonna start looking for jobs in the civic sector. I hadn't actually heard of Ashoka at the time. So I started applying, and everyone told me if you want to start in this sector, you needed to start as an intern. Yeah. And this is the safest way to just put your foot in the door, and then you can move internally. So that's what I did. So I started applying to all the internships I found, and I was lucky enough to get an internship at UNDP and an internship at Ashoka. And contrary to what people believed I would opt for, I went for Ashoka. I was advised that UNDP, it was going to be a different learning experience, but Ashoka would really show me what it was like as an intern to work in this sector, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's how I joined Ashoka, and I had a 4-month internship at Ashoka, and it was a business development internship, and I stayed there for 4 months. Luckily also, or by coincidence actually, it was by mere coincidence, when my internship was about to end, And the venture person at Ashoka was leaving his job. So I had the opportunity to apply to that. So it was a series of fortunate events, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, at a platform like Ashoka, you work with so many change makers out there, and you worked in the venture segment, so you went through, the initial journey of a lot of these fellows. So, what has been one of those, most inspiring event for you within this, experience that you had with Ashoka?
What I loved about particularly our office, because it was a regional office, so we were based in Cairo, but we used to work with entrepreneurs across the region, so the Maghreb region, the Levant, the Gulf, and Egypt. Growing up, if you're not exposed to other cultures, other countries, you stay in that bubble for a while, unless someone tells you that there's a life out there. You're gonna stay there for a while. And Ashoka was great because it showed me that, it exposed me to all these different entrepreneurs and some of the most inspiring people across the region, really. And my favorite moments were just learning about the personal stories of these entrepreneurs. I think one of the most inspiring stories was a Tunisian social entrepreneur. His mother was actually had cancer, but she had spent 10 years of her life, the last 10 years of her life, treating cancer with aspirin. The doctors weren't able to diagnose it. They lived in the suburbs of Tunisia, a very poor family. And when she was dying, that was the only time they found out that she had cancer. Right. And this guy said, I'm not gonna wait to see other suburban women or other women from rural areas that couldn't afford healthcare, that had no access to healthcare. I won't wait to see them dying the same way my mother died. So he dedicated his whole life to that. And the way these personal stories are transformed into national initiatives and regional initiatives is really amazing. Like seeing how humble and modest he could have done anything, but he decided, no, I cannot tolerate. It's people not tolerating injustices, not just for themselves, because I think most of us don't tolerate injustices for ourselves, but really going above and beyond to not accept that for other people as well. I think that's my favorite part.
That's the power. That was a beautiful journey with Ashoka, and right now you're also working on your own venture, Float. So, how did that came out? What's the story behind Float, and what's it about?
Yeah, so Float, I've always been interested in the food and beverage scene in Egypt in general. So it's a population of 100 million. You have a lot of tummies to feed, and it was something that was always at the back of my head. But I didn't grow up in a family of entrepreneurs or business people in general, so it wasn't always something that not necessarily accepted, but it wasn't always welcome. Like if I had said, oh, I'd love to go into engineering, or it's a family of professionals, so anything other than that wasn't always the best. We didn't have that experience, so but it was always there. Float is actually if I can say, like my second baby. My first baby kind of passed away prematurely, sadly. It was actually Fredgie's. Fredgie's was a healthy snacks, very small healthy snacks food project. It was at a time when healthy snacks weren't really available in Egypt. And but it was very early on. Fredgie's was 2014, 2015 maybe. And I was doing it with my best friend. We didn't have that apprenticeship experience. We didn't have, looking back, all this of course is in retrospect, but looking back, we wouldn't necessarily have managed. I think it was good that it was a great experience at the time. We were selling on the coast of Egypt. We prepped healthy snacks in an icebox, and we just moved from umbrella to umbrella selling these snacks to people. We never formalized it, so it kind of just died on its own.
It was the start of being an entrepreneur.
It was definitely the start. It was definitely the start of my interest as well. It showed me that I wanted to do this at one point or another, but maybe the timing wasn't great at the time. In 2015, my aunt was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease that forced her to shift to a plant-based diet. We're carnivores in Egypt, so we love our meat. We love our so we didn't have that many options for her. I remember telling my friend who was in Germany at the time to bring us back gluten. She had to be gluten-free too. So
right.
Gluten-free options, dairy alternatives, and you start thinking what's available and why is it so difficult to access these products, and if they were accessible, why are they so expensive?
Right.
You think about it, but you never really. Sometimes you don't do anything about it. 5 years later, in 2020, I was connected to my current co-founders. They live in New York. They were dairy alternative consumers, and they started seeing the opportunity for oat milk.
Mm-hmm.
And we started talking about, is there room for a dairy alternative in the Middle East? What does the market look like? How difficult is it to access dairy alternatives? And so we mapped the sector. We understood what was out there, and we realized that this lifestyle was unaffordable for so many people. Although, upon further research, we realized that 68% of the Middle Eastern population is actually lactose intolerant. And because of the lack of statistics, we really don't know who else is following very particular diets as such. So not just because they're lactose intolerant, but who has diabetes and who is vegetarian for environmental reasons. So we don't have an exact number, but we do know that a lot of people have opted for vegan and vegetarian diets over the past 7 to 10 years, and the supply of products wasn't catching up as quickly. And this is how Float started. So we did find a gap in the market, in the dairy alternatives in general, but oat milk in particular.
Right.
And yeah, that's how. So Float is the first. Hopefully, by the time we launch, it's supposed to be the first oat milk manufacturer. Oat milk products. So the initial idea is to start with oat milk and then go into yogurts, cheeses, and etc.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a really cool gap you're trying to fill out there. So you're doing this, the job was going on, and decided to go for the masters at LSE.
Yes.
So what made you take that route?
Yeah. So started working on Float in June of 2020. I had started applying to master's programs early that year. I think at that point I joined Ashoka in 2017, so
right.
That was 4 years or 3 years, 7 months into Ashoka. I think it was definitely the right time to start building on what I had learned at Ashoka and taking it a step further. I had the practical know-how. I learned the practical skills I needed for the sector at Ashoka. It was an amazing experience, but I realized that I didn't really have the theoretical or academic lens. So a master's degree was just the really natural evolution of the journey. I started looking for a lot of programs. I think all of us did that. Just looked for every social entrepreneurship program that existed, and not a lot of universities have that program. Exactly. So you don't have a lot of universities, and you don't have very highly ranked universities doing this program.
Right.
So LSE definitely had it. So the program was here, and it's a top ranked university. So I think it was a no-brainer for me, like why LSE, that's basically why. And the curriculum was very interesting. I really liked the fact that there was a consulting project, so there was also a practical lens to it. So I wanted that academic rigor, and I also wanted that practical part that I hope to find in the consultancy.
Right. So you, while going through this course, you also did the LSE Generate for Fluid. You know, how has been that experience for you working with accelerators? You have done that in the past, but like how different LSE Generate accelerator worked for you?
No, I think like before coming to LSE, I thought I'd come out with a master's degree.
Right.
Like that was my vision for it. Okay, 1 year later, I just want this certificate. I want to have this degree. But that the LSE Generate part was completely unexpected for me. And it was such a pleasant surprise just coming in. And I think I found it by pure coincidence, the LSE Generate. I actually found it on the Instagram page. That's how I found out about the LSE Generate in general. And then there was an ad for their funding competition. So I talked to my co-founders, and we were very excited about it. We didn't have a pitch deck at the time. It forced us and motivated us to start working on a pitch deck, start really organizing our thoughts. Like we were working on this, we had progressed a lot, but it was all practical. So we went and mapped the sector. We had, we understood what the problem was, where the gaps were, but we didn't have it on paper in writing. We didn't have it in the form of a pitch deck. So I'm very grateful for LSE Generate that it really pushed us to have that pitch deck, to organize our thoughts, to really understand. It also showed us what the loopholes in our thinking were.
Right.
So one of the comments we got at the funding competition at the finale was, it seemed like a very big problem for that solution.
Okay.
For the solution you're proposing. So you can't say that 70% of the population is lactose intolerant, but only say you're targeting 10, 15, 20% of the population. So it shows you where you need to tweak and where you need to adjust your thought process and how to do that. So I think even if we hadn't made it to the final round, just having that pitch deck is really thanks to the Generate team. But luckily we did go through, I think, 2 or 3 rounds, and then the final was amazing as well because it did come with some funding.
You won.
So that was also great. The experience, the Generate funding competition experience was great. The second semester we thought, okay, we have some funding, we really want to push this to launch. We saw another opportunity for the accelerator, and I thought, I'm not so sure they would be interested to support the same startup twice. The day before the deadline, we decided, why not? Let's try this, and we got into the accelerator. So that was really great as well. The funding competition was great. The accelerator took it a step further in the way it was so tailored to. So I think they ended up taking 12 teams through the process. So 12 teams are currently working with Generate as part of their Generate Accelerator program, the GAP program. And what was great about this is every team has one coach or one mentor.
Right.
So it's really tailored to every team's needs. And this is great, and every startup needs that. I like that it's tailored, but I also like that at the beginning of each week we have the tasks we want to achieve during that week, and we have someone holding us accountable. So, sometimes all of us, we don't hold ourselves accountable as such, and maybe not as often as needed. so that this is a weekly task we have to do, and we're held accountable for the weekly for what we had to achieve that week. Just pushes you to be faster, to be on top of things, to keep being motivated, because sometimes it's a very daunting journey. Sometimes when there are a lot of external factors that play a role, sometimes it can get very daunting. So this was also great. So the accelerator was great too.
So LSE Generate, but you have also done like some other, and you have been part of Ashoka, so you have seen like within how these kind of programs are run. There are other think tanks and other ecosystem players that do support startups. What more do you think, people like us, people who are coming to a cohort like SIE to be in the sector, to build something, would need from this sort of an ecosystem support?
I think that it's very important to think of our needs in the sector. As social entrepreneurs, I haven't seen. So I was actually looking into the accelerators. I'm thinking of joining an accelerator when we graduate, hopefully, back in Egypt. So I was just looking at the different incubators and accelerators, and I realized that incubators and accelerators aren't really focused on the social sector.
Okay.
So I don't think we have enough programs that are tailored towards social entrepreneurs who might have completely different needs than for-profit or business entrepreneurs.
Right.
So I think we need some tailoring of our programs. And part of this involves being, another thing that I noticed was we're not patient enough with social entrepreneurs.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think this is also an aspect, like impact for business entrepreneurs needs to be, you need that ROI, you need that impact right away. For social entrepreneurs, that's not the case. So it would be unfair for a social entrepreneur to be assessed in the same way.
That's true, yeah.
So this is definitely, I think, investors and stakeholders in the ecosystem in general need to be more patient. So we call it patient capital. Like capital and resources need to be more patient with social entrepreneurs. And I also think a lot of us need, and this is something we gained from the accelerator we're in with SIE right now, the pre-incubation or pre-acceleration stage. How do we prepare for that accelerator interview? What do we need? How do we hone in on our target market, on the problem? All these are details that we need to have, that we need to know very well before we can even apply to these accelerators. So I think there's also a necessary pre-incubation phase that all of us need to go through.
Yeah, I think it's coming on, like it's slowly evolving, but not at the pace in which the social entrepreneurs are kind of coming into this sector. The sector is evolving.
True.
Yeah, so yeah, I think moving just towards the last question, the last part, there's so much to do more. There's so much to learn, there's so much to impact. What is one thing that keeps you going, that keeps you inspired to be in this sector?
I think growing up, my dad always used to say, it's the Arabic equivalent of it, but when you're a bit more fortunate than others, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. And I think it has always resonated with me that we're born different, but I think we also have a huge responsibility towards our communities and our countries and anyone that is less privileged, to give back. And I think this keeps me motivated. I think there's a huge, over the past years, there's been a huge rift between different people in the different sectors.
Yeah.
And I think we need to really work to close that rift. At this point, I don't think people should see it as an option. I think everyone should think that it's part of our responsibility towards each other. So I think that keeps me motivated, honestly.
Everyone needs to do their part.
Yeah.
So on that note, guys, everyone is a change maker. Everyone can do their part. Build a longer table, not a higher fence. So now let's move on to the next exciting part of the program, the rapid fire. Are you ready, Mariam?
Fingers crossed.
All right. So the first part is about you. Okay. Who is your role model?
My dad.
A weird thing about you.
I have a weird obsession with socks.
What did you want it to be when growing up?
I wanted to be a nurse.
What are you most afraid of?
Abandonment.
Your favorite holiday location?
Holiday location? The North Coast in Egypt and Croatia.
And favorite location in London?
London. Regent Park.
And your favorite professor at LSE?
Sol. Restaurant.
People you hate the most?
People who are selfish.
People you like the most?
People who are generous. No, like people who are, just generous with their time, with their effort.
What would be the title of your biography?
My biography. From rugs to rugs. No. I really don't know. We can come back to that.
Who would you cast to be you in a biopic movie on you?
My best friend.
Okay, the next part is quotes or a word. Okay, a quote for researchers.
Get out of the lab of your of the office.
A quote for consultants.
Listen more.
A quote for corporates.
Corporates. Stop modern day slavery.
A quote for politicians.
Too many to count. Stop ethnic cleansing, apartheid. I don't know. Be ethical.
A quote for entrepreneurs.
For entrepreneurs, you don't need to be perfect. Or no, it's never gonna be perfect. Actually, I think for entrepreneurs, it's never gonna be perfect, but you just need to brace yourself.
Right. Great. And this is the next section on, something best in your life. The best is advice that you have got.
Don't wait for it to be perfect. I used to always, so if an exam at school, in university, if there's a 3-question exam, I'd spend so much time on the first question, perfecting it, and my mom would always tell me, you're never gonna get 12 out of 10 in that question. So just do all of them, do an okay job in each one, and don't spend too much time on anything, because nothing's gonna be that great anyways. It needs to be good enough.
True.
So that was 21 sentences.
Best addiction that you have.
Addiction. Best addiction is actually, I think I'm addicted to to some people that I look up to. I'm addicted to them, and to spending time with them.
Best entrepreneur that you have met.
Best entrepreneur. His name is Salim Masalha. He's originally Palestinian French, but he's lived in Egypt for most of his life, and his mom is Egyptian. he started an initiative called the Very Nile, and it's to basically clean the Nile.
Oh, right.
And I think 5 years ago he came to me showing me like this. It's not a ship, but it's a huge equipment. I don't know what it cost at the time. A very big sum of money, and he said, "This is my dream. I want to buy this for a very night because it looks like a ship that would walk on the Nile and just clean it as it goes, instead of having to manually do that." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh, great, Salem," but I don't think that's ever gonna happen. And recently, he actually bought a few of those with funds he raised, and I just love his ambition and I love his dedication, and I love that, you know, when they say entrepreneurs see a world that doesn't currently exist, he sees that world. So I love that about him.
Awesome. And the best book that you have read?
It's not I don't think it's necessarily the best book, but the last book I read that resonated with me is called Attached, and it talks about people's different attachment styles. And it's I think it's very interesting to try to learn more about yourself and how you react to different situations and how you behave in different relationships, friendships, which makes you understand where you're coming from, but it also helps you understand where other people are coming from. And I think it makes people more empathetic.
Right.
And I like that about it. I love that about it.
Awesome. So that was Mariam Tag for you guys. I hope you feel as inspired as I do, and see you in the next episode of the program. That was Mariam Tag for you. That's it, I'm done. So now sorry.
Asmita, have fun. Asmita, have fun. No, it. And action.